be here live streaming Dean and EigenLayer AVS. How is going, Sriram? Back to DEF CON. How is the resting going? Still some energy left?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of really cool stuff happening, in crypto overall, but definitely also in the EigenLayer ecosystem at labs, where we are cranking
Nice,
hard on what the next new things to build are. So, yeah,
nice.
definitely super excited to be here and to do this with you, Francisco, and
That's so
looking
exciting.
forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm hearing a lot, I'm exchanging a lot with like AVS from AVS developers to kind of like, different like builders in the space, especially DEF CON was this kind of like full of energy, builder energy around this. We even had this AVS day together and was super exciting to see all this kind of bunch of AVS building in the space and innovation. I think let's kind of set up the context a little bit before kind of like EG is joining. But we announced, Infura like DIN, like decentralized Infura network launches EigenLayer AVS. We will talk a little bit about what does it mean, but let's actually give a little bit of background of could be builders, could be users, everybody that is listening to this live stream, and make sure if you have any comments, feel free to answer and ask questions. But before asking what is an EVS, like Shiram, give us a little bit of context about what is EigenLayer and kind of
Yeah.
like what does it mean to restake Ethereum and much more.
Yeah, thank you. Um, Eigen and German for your own layer. So the idea of EigenLayer was designed around open innovation. Open innovation is the idea that hey, anybody can come and build whatever systems that they want on top of a common trust network, right? And this is the original reason why I think Ethereum got so big is because it offers a common layer. Anybody can come and build applications, dApps, as purely decentralized applications as smart contracts on top of Ethereum. However, there is some limitations to what can be built as smart contracts, right? Firstly,
Hmm.
you have to be able to express it inside an EVM. And the way Ethereum works is every node replicates all the computation that is done inside the EVM,
Hmm.
using Ethereum's consensus protocol and using the Ethereum's like finality, all these different things. So the thing that we wanted to do with EigenLayer is to expand the scope of what sets of applications, what sets
Hmm.
of networks can be built on top of like the broader Ethereum trust network. And so that's what gave rise to the concept of EigenLayer, right? Like I
Nice.
said, Eigen and German for your own. So anybody can come and build, their own layers on top. And so as an example, like going all the way back to, I think, maybe 2014, 2015,
Hmm.
Con, Filecoin wanted to build on top of Ethereum. Filecoin is this
Hmm.
decentralized
Yeah, I
storage
remember.
network.
Yeah.
Wanted to build on top of Ethereum. And you can't build a storage network as a smart contract because
Hmm.
you have to set up your own decentralized network. And then so they had to go and kind of like set up like this whole ecosystem in order to just build a particular feature and a service that's very useful for the rest of the ecosystem. And so we saw this pattern that there are lots of services that cannot be expressed as a smart contract on top of EVM, but they need you to build your own network, whether you're
Hmm.
doing, an Oracle or a storage or a AI or, whatever set of things that just simply cannot be expressed on top of like the EVM, you
Yes.
need to actually go and start your own network. And so when you start your own network, the obvious problem is who's supplying trust? Who
Hmm.
are the nodes? Where are these nodes coming from? How do we trust that these nodes are going to do the thing they say they're going to do, right?
Yeah.
And that's really what EigenLayer started as, like a marketplace for decentralized trust.
Yeah.
Takes the network, the validators, and the operators from the Ethereum as a starting point.
Hmm.
They can stake ETH or other tokens as as needed, but basically use a common source of trust to supply
Yeah.
to like any network that can get bootstrapped on top. So that's what EigenLayer is a platform for builders to come and build new networks while using a common decentralized trust network. So that's the
100%.
EigenLayer.
I can definitely resonate on that, as a kind of like a builder in the space, running your own infra is also quite expensive, it's time consuming, and I think also around developer tooling, it's kind of like different to standardize. So I definitely kind of like I see the big value. I definitely took a lot of time to read, from the white paper to research to all the books that Nader is sending out, but I think it's definitely super worth it around all this kind of like the utility on the side. Cool, sounds good. And AG, welcome. You made it. How is going?
Yeah,
How is your
thanks.
trip back to from DEF CON? Yeah.
It was good. DevCon still continues to be my favorite event, not just because sentimentally that's where we launched Infura in 2016 at DevCon 2 in Shanghai, but
Yeah.
it's it's where I get to like catch up on so much of the protocol research and like lower level infrastructure things that are going on that I can't always follow.
100%. And yeah, I remember, I don't remember if it was Shanghai or Cancun that the Wi-Fi was not working well. I remember there was a
I
DEF
think
CON
both of
where,
them.
yeah, right? Yeah, too many strong builders vibes. Cool, but I mean, e.g. Infura, right? Like, so I was giving a context before you were joining, Dean as the first AVS. Let's give a quick context, like what is Dean and kind of like what is purpose in Web3 space?
Sure. Yeah. So, in case you haven't heard like what DIN is, DIN stands for Decentralized Infrastructure Network. We announced it 2 years ago as Infura's decentralized protocol that we were building. We went the opposite route of what traditionally people would do is they would do a bunch of research and come up with their design and then drop the white paper and say, like, this is what we're planning on building. We started building Infura as a traditional like RPC API service in 2016 and has been serving the developer community. It's been serving the developer community since then. And so we were in this fortunate position of being able to work on transitioning from a more traditional business model into a more crypto native model. And we didn't know what that would be. And we had some ideas, like we knew that certain types of like token mechanics like staking would be essential for us to offer some kind of like on-chain service guarantee, but there was a lot of things that were still fuzzy, and instead of spending like a year to 2 years researching that and writing it up, we said we're actually going to try to build this out in the open. And we announced in 2022 that we were going to be building this, that our initiative was called DIN, and that we
Hmm.
wanted to partner with other people that were interested in this to build it collaboratively. And so over the last 18 months or so, there have been several dozen teams that have been contributing to this current version of DIN that's now live and that is now working on this EigenLayer integration. So we have over a dozen different infrastructure providers that are serving RPC requests for people that are using DIN. If you're a current Infura user or you've used Infura in the past, you'll be familiar with, you go to our website, you log into the dashboard, you get an API key, and when you start sending requests to interact with Ethereum or Polygon or some other network, traditionally the Infura team was the one that was running that node infrastructure. What we did over the last 18 months was partner with other like high value, high quality RPC providers to serve that traffic. And this came from a need on the Infura side of being able to keep up with the explosion of new chains. Like
Yeah.
we started to see that trend maybe as early as 4 years ago, that the future was multi-chain, that people were not just staying on Ethereum or one other layer one, they were starting to bridge assets to other chains, use applications that needed access to multiple chains. And as an infrastructure provider, that was very costly for us to keep up with that demand. And so DIN was our solution to creating a marketplace where service providers could offer services for developers, and developers could go to one place to find all of these different networks and APIs that they might want access to.
Nice, super interesting. I actually want to share this. Like I'm trying to always to get spicy, getting like tweets or comments for people like they wanna ask us question. But
Sure.
I remember seeing this one, e.g. On just want to try to understand a little bit like the functionality or how Dean is kind of like multi-purpose and doing like kind of the transaction redirect. Like you want to quickly like, I don't know if it's visible enough, but how in a nutshell is working on the kind of like processing the transactions specific to different kind of like RPC providers?
Sorry, should I be able to see what you're sharing? Is it
Oh,
or
are you sharing? Yeah, maybe it doesn't work. Oh, yes. I think try to share one more time. Let me check what is happening. Yeah, that's why you probably didn't add the context here.
no problem?
There you
Or you
are.
can just read
You
it
see
off
it.
if that's oh there now I see it. Uh-huh.
Yeah, there was a cool article around kind of like Dean on IVS, and I remember like this graph, and I said, okay, this is what really Dean is about. Kind of like, do you want to kind of like dive a little bit like on what are kind of like the main boxes and how kind of like the transaction are being processed?
Sure. Yeah. Let's see. Where to start? So that yellow box in the bottom, which kind of just casually calls itself a node registry, is the thing that enables DIN. That's our on-chain marketplace. And in this early version, we called it a node registry, but we're now calling it a service registry because there are other APIs that want to list on this in addition to just RPC nodes. And so by having an on-chain registry, this is the way that people can discover what services are available to consume, and then you're able to build tooling that actually utilizes that. Because say right now, because our node registry isn't live and in production for like mainnet, how would you find say like the latest new layer 2 that launched on Solana, and how are you going to actually get an RPC endpoint for that? You'd probably go to Google, you'll search like, oh, RPC provider for this chain. You're going to find these websites, then you're going to say, is that one reputable? Let me go on Twitter and see how many followers they have, or on X and see how many followers they have. Let me see if other people I know are using them. And then you're going to go there, you're going to sign up, you're going to put in your credit card, and then you get your API key, and now you can use that thing. And what if you needed 3 of those new rollups that you needed access to, and you're going to have to do those, and not all of those rollups are supported by the same provider? It's not a great developer experience, right? And that's what we were
Hmm.
starting to see our customers running into, because not every network was supported by Infura.
Hmm. Yeah.
So we started to envision DIN as like crypto enabled payment rails for services on Web3. So it can be like a standardized way to find services and pay for these services. So it all starts with the node registry. The node registry is where a provider would actually list their service. So if you start like Francesco RPC, you can
Hmm.
have Francesco RPC on this node registry and say, I only support Ethereum. I'm an ETH maxi. Or
Hmm.
you can list, 12 different services that you want to support, and it's listed here. So maybe somebody's looking for Ethereum and they look
Hmm.
for all of these different providers and they find you on there. Or once you've established a reputation for yourself, which I'll get to in a bit, they
Hmm.
might say, I want to use other services. What other services does Francesco RPC support? And that
Hmm.
information is on the node registry. So the node operators register with the node registry. There's another component on the network that's called a watcher, which does what you would expect in the crypto space. Somebody somewhere needs to be actually validating that
Hmm.
your service is what it reports to be. And so a watcher entity looks at this registry that has, in addition to the listing of services, it has like a service definition. So when you say you support Ethereum, what does that mean? And at some point, something, which is where DAO governance comes into play,
Hmm. Hmm.
potentially, is something needs to decide what it means to support Ethereum mainnet. Like, does that mean you support ETH call? Does it mean you support get blocked by number? Like any number of methods. And there needs to be a consensus around what that is. And once you actually agree on, okay, this is how that service is defined, Francesco
Hmm.
says he supports this service, the watcher can then test and validate not just that you meet the criteria of offering that service, but also what's the level of quality of your service. And it can be done in not in like a rating type of way where it ranks you like third out of 10 different providers. It's very objective. Like these are the latency metrics, performance metrics, error numbers, and things like that. And that's that public bulletin board that's in the top right. So that's like it's an event stream essentially. Like watchers are continuously emitting events, and the representation of that is a public bulletin board that then consumers can pull that information from to make their routing decisions. And
Nice.
by consumers, I don't mean like a MetaMask user or an end user, because end users and customers at that level aren't aware of these types of details. Like at this low level infrastructure, it's tools and applications that are consuming from that bulletin board. So that next layer is we call a gateway or ingress operator. This is something like the current Infura.io product
Hmm.
is considered a gateway because it's the first thing that a consumer would interact with to get connected to a blockchain. And it, meaning the Infura team, is the thing that would be deciding how its traffic gets routed. And this is where the permissionless thing comes into play, because Infura isn't the only gateway or won't be the only gateway. It's
Hmm.
permissionless. Anybody can choose to be a
Exciting.
gateway on this network, and people can decide to customize the behavior of their gateway however they want. For instance, if you're based in Tokyo, you might want to serve your local APAC region and prioritize the way that your traffic gets routed by
Yeah.
directing traffic to node infrastructure that's local and optimized for that region versus somebody that's in Europe or somebody that's in the US. Or there might be a different set of criteria. Like maybe you focus on only supporting like ZK EVM like
Hmm.
networks, and that's your specialty as a provider, and that's what people know to go to you for. But you're regardless consuming all of this health check and um, event data from this public bulletin board system so that you can decide how you're going to route your traffic.
Nice, nice. That's yeah, that's super exciting, and I really appreciate like this kind of like deep dive in live streaming. I wish like there were more stuff like this that we can deep dive. But when you speak about towers, watch towers specifically, like Sriram, is there an analogy with the AVS category? Because I wanna actually like jump in here directly. I know that you are like a big fan of kind of like okay, what are AVS in a nutshell? This is one of the best kind of like category that gave me like at the beginning like what is happening with AVS and where do I need to look like around categories. You want to kind of like clarify what are AVSs and what are kind of like your favorite categories that builder are building now or they should build today.
Yeah, thank you, Francisco. I just before I dive into this, just want to zoom out and like see what's going on here.
Hmm.
Uh, you know, I remember in September 2022 when the Infura team announced that hey, we're thinking about this decentralization roadmap with building the tin. I wrote this tweet saying that this is firstly just like such an unusual thing that a market leader in Fura, by far, right, will come up and say, hey, we we want to figure out how to decentralize our position. It's a crazy thing. Like, and hats off to the Infura team, to Consensus, e.g., Joe Lubin, for leading this effort. And I mean,
Thanks.
this is I mean, just like to put it in context, right? It's like, say, Google coming up tomorrow and saying, hey, search is for everybody. Anybody can come and provide search results. That's not happening, right? Like, that's just not happening. In fact, Twitter, for example, started with open APIs and then like closed their APIs over time because they said, hey, we don't want to leak all value to like this ecosystem, this outside participants, and we want to capture more value. And this has almost never happened in the history that a market leader comes and willingly, like when EG was saying, oh, it's everybody's thinking like, what is Infura's position? Is this like it's a gateway, but you can run your own gateway, is what EG is saying. Like, this is crazy. Okay, this is as a space, we should be immensely proud that we have like actually participants like Consensus and Infura who are taking this leadership position to say it's important to like hold our own values, right? So that we're building for decentralization, we're building for permissionlessness, and everybody is better off. We talk a lot about at EigenLayer win-win games, infinite sum games, which is this idea that how do we actually build things that increase the net pie, not like competing for a fixed sum pie. And AG started talking about, when he set up the DIN, he said, hey, there's a scaling problem which is inherent in this whole system, right? So it's not just, hey, decentralization, permissionlessness is the right ethos. It's also that you can solve complex problems using this method. I want to expand to 3,000 chains, on Ethereum rollups, right? Like our vision is there'll be a million rollups, right? So there's not like one, there's not two, there's a million rollups. And for example, we're building Eigen DA. We did this stunt sometime back called All Chains Fit on EigenDA, which is basically we took every chain, like this is starting from Solana to Bitcoin, everything, and just put it on top of EigenDA. And we have, more bandwidth than all of them put together. And the reason I mentioned this is our vision. Our vision is there'll be millions of chains, right, on Ethereum, like inside the Ethereum ecosystem already. So even if you're a ETH maxi, it's, fine to have like millions of chains. And if you're not, like, definitely there are going to be like other chains which are going to be willing. So how do you support all of this? How do you support all of this in a scalable manner? Do I need to, call, some central party to support my chain? Can I create mechanisms where it's permissionless? And the thing is, when you want to make something permissionless, you have to somehow imbue trust into it. Okay, so this is an important thing before we go into the whole category of AVS and why we need to do like the complex things that EG was trying to bring here is, imagine you say like, oh, when Infura is providing service, people have a trust, right? Like it's Joe Lubin, it's EG, like it's highly trusted people, like it's consensus, it's a big brand which is providing the service. Everybody can know, and what output quality to expect, that the output is real, correct. All of these things are kind of bundled into that. To make something permissionless, we need to underwrite trust to it, right? I mean, you can say it's permissionless, and then like anybody can come and give responses. What if their responses are garbage? What if they're trying to cheat? What if they're trying to attack? The way to make something permissionless is to actually give a mechanism for them to underwrite trust into their answers, right? And one way that we do this is I put a pot of money and say, hey, I put in a bunch of ETH or whatever token, and then I'm saying, hey, I'm promising that I'm going to hold to my bar, which is I'm going to provide the responses on time. If there's an SLA, I'm going to provide the right answer because I'm signing some of these responses, right? That would be like signed RPC responses, and if I break some covenants, there's some mechanism. EG talked about watchers, right? So some mechanism that will kind of hold me to court, hold me to account on it. And so this is really what EigenLayer. So I started with EigenLayer as this open innovation. Anybody can come and build their own layer. Anybody can come and participate in this open, permissionless economy. But usually, what is missing when you want to make something open is how do you trust this open system? Like, who are these people? Like, how do I trust them? And so our answer to that was, hey, can we create a common group of stake and node operator set which can underwrite trust into it? So that's the kind of like how I think EigenLayer fits in with this, idea of DIN. And that's why I want to start with, this is both a fit to the ethos of what we're building in this space, decentralization, permissionlessness,
Collaboration,
but
yes.
also it's a technical unlock simultaneously. The technical unlock is now, by making something permissionless, you make it highly scalable. Like I build a chain, I just come in, opt in and like create my own like service providers, like ask my friends, whatever, right? Like I don't need to actually come and deal with the small group of people who need to, or one company. And that's a huge unlock for the space, right? And I think as Ethereum moves from like a single chain to like this multi-chain future, as we ourselves as a space are moving to this multi-chain future, this is a huge unlock. Okay, having said that, now like that is the same premise on which we designed this idea of AVSs, right? AVSs as this category. We call them actively validated services. Actively validated services, what is it? It's a service, right? Somebody's providing a service. So the first thing to note here is it's not a chain, right? We didn't say, oh, restaked chains or staked chains. Or the reason we don't say chain is because chain is a very narrow concept, right? Like a narrow concept of what a decentralized network can do. Decentralized network can do so many things, right? It can provide services. It can run AI inference and give you an answer. It can run an RPC request and give you an answer. It can do like even DIN itself is like a meta concept, right? You can start
Mhm.
providing all kinds of services on top of it. Now that was the same vision to which we were designing this term AVS, right? Actively validated services. Is you're providing some service, right? And it could be a chain, it could be other services. Francisco, if you can pull up that.
Oh yes, let me get it back. I want to just want to also say, EG, why do you think is such an important milestones before we're diving into AVS? Because I got this from Sheeran, right? But I am also a big believer. This is huge. But why do you think EG is such an important milestones?
Because DIN in this first phase, we weren't calling permissionless and trustless. It was federated and trusted.
Hmm.
Like that's the difference that we took with, or that's the different path that we took with Infura getting to this like protocol development is instead of starting with that, we were already a traditional centralized SaaS product. How could we incrementally move towards being a trustless protocol? And one of the key steps there was how do you move us, meaning Infura, out of the position of being the one
Hmm.
vetting the providers and adding them to the network? And you could come up with your own like restate or staking system. But when I first met Shriram, I think it was over 2 years ago now, probably 3 years ago, and saw one of the first versions of the EigenLayer proposal for a restake, I'm like, wow, like this is really cool because it is very expensive to do what we do running infrastructure at scale. You're spending tens, hundreds of thousands of dollars a month on infrastructure. And if you have to tell somebody to stake on top of that, it doesn't work for like one of two reasons. It's either they're spending 100 grand a month on infrastructure, so stake $1,000 extra. It's like, well, that didn't really do anything. Or it's cost prohibitive because then you're saying, well, we need you to stake, 3x what you're paying for infrastructure. In which case that seemed like it lowers the barrier to entry and doesn't actually promote decentralization like we would want to, and increasing the amount of providers. So restaking actually enabled us to use existing providers that are out there in a way where it still has a low barrier to entry to having them join the network. That makes sense?
It does. It does. That's actually super interesting. It's also like a natural um, decentralization around what Infura. I started building the apps, deploying on Infura. And then you have like always the same questions. And I think decentralization, having a agglomerate of like RPC, like provider, kind of like and kind of like the job of Dean is really kind of redirecting all these transactions basically, but with different providers specifically, right? I think give flexibility to the dApps builders, but also give the flexibility in terms of kind of like on-chain accessibility. Your network will never really like be down itself. You will choose low latency providers. I think there is so many benefits that both users and builder can really like leverage. Sorry, Sriram. Let's go back to the ABS category.
EG, can you mention a little bit what scale we're talking about? How many requests, per year this kind of network
Oh,
is?
This is interesting. I would share again.
so yeah,
Super.
let me, I typically don't do the math of like per year. Per day, it's billions of API requests per day, right? The thing that's interesting now is that while there are so many additional RPC providers in the space, like when we started, we were the first and the only one, and so it's kind of a weird position to be in because inevitably your market share declines because you went from having everything to slowly sharing that, and yet our our traffic still grows because this ecosystem has still just grown at a ridiculous pace. But it is billions per day of these RPC requests, and every time we add new networks, then that grows pretty linearly, I'd say, with unless there's some like massive adoption spike that one particular chain might see over another.
Nice, nice. So, we're talking about hundreds of billions of requests
Yeah, for
here. So
sure.
hopefully we'll get the trillion.
Oh,
Uh,
I would say it's safe to say it's trillions a year. Yeah.
okay, so that's a crazy kind of scale that we're, for most people, they're like, oh, what is, how much volume is, crypto doing? Because I think it's important to recognize that
Mhm.
if you look at like a lot of Web 2, you read more than you write. And that's how like things are, right?
Yeah.
Like you should not be writing things where like nobody's reading, right? So it's obviously like when you write something, you want at least a few people like to read it, and that's the normal scale. The internet scale is you write once, you read like hundreds, thousands of times, right? So that's the so when we're thinking about scale, people normally just think about like, oh, how much can you write. Write is one direction, it's important, and we're trying to scale it, as I mentioned with DA. But read is, a simple example of this is something like Polymarket, right?
Mhm.
Polymarket is this betting market, and you can look at like how much of the total TVL of bets was is basically $400 million. So it's
Mhm.
not that much. I mean, EigenLayer has $15 billion, but how many people read it, right? That's the net utility of the system, is everybody reading the system, right? So I think that's
Right.
just some calibration point for a lot of people.
Mhm.
They say, oh, crypto is very small. No, it's not small, it's big, because
Mhm.
many people don't have to write, but they're reading, and reading is an important thing, because you're looking at what is happening in the chain and then understanding, oh yeah, I trust that. And so that's
Mhm.
super, super
That's a good
useful.
point. I think it's also is following up the debates around on-chain versus off-chain kind of like settlements. Like, what's your take on that? Like, where you think should be kind of like the most efficient way, because it's always like kind of like a trade-off, right? So that's also like a tricky like yeah, debate. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's what we want to break with EigenLayer.
Hmm.
Is is it really like, what is the difference between like the thing? Is it on chain versus off chain, or is it how much trustless is it versus how much
Right.
trusted is it? And that's
Mm.
really what this DIN EigenLayer partnership illustrates. It's
Hmm.
basically breaking that mental framework, that it's not about is it on chain, is DIN plus EigenLayer, is it on chain, off chain? No, it's trustless, and that's really what the most important thing is. And as we it is still a roadmap, right? So just to calibrate the expectation of like, people, it's not like tomorrow you go in and now dinner is like fully trustless. No, it's not like that. There's a roadmap of how we
Hmm.
actually endow this service with more and more trust and more permissionlessness, because as you go through the various steps of, oh, now slashing went live, now like slashing is this much versus that much. This is really like the way to think about most of these things, is built progressively. And I think already Infura and DIN has shown that that's start with centralized. Now it was federated, and then now moving to this decentralization, permissionlessness phase. So I think a lot of what we're trying to do with EigenLayer is completely break this model. That's why I call it verifiable cloud sometimes, right? So it's like a cloud, right? And but it's just
Yeah.
verifiable, and that is the most important property. In fact, I would say even more than decentralized in my mind, that hey, it's permissionless and verifiable. So in fact, we're thinking of like rebranding AVS. AVS used to be actively validated services as
Hmm.
autonomous verifiable services, right? They're autonomous, they
Mm.
just run on their own, right? Like run on their own because it's permissionless, because anybody, as long as there's money to be made, somebody will show up and like
Mm.
offer that service. And it's verifiable when they do offer that service. If they don't do hold to the bar, hold to the SLA, hold to their commitments, they'll be held to task. And so this breaks this on-chain off-chain dichotomy quite a bit, and we're super excited with this as like a kind of a flagship use case to demonstrate like what kinds of things you can build, because it's
Mm.
no longer like, oh, what throughput am I doing? That's not the trillions of requests per year, like, and
Mm.
that's the so now what services are you offering in a trustless verifiable manner? Can you already make it compatible with the DIN, like, because it's already out, or maybe you need something special and you can come and build it as an ABS on EigenLayer. So that's our hope and vision for like why we are super excited about
Mm.
this.
I like that
Very cool.
rebrand too. I think that does fit
Well,
better to
yeah,
say, what was it? Autonomous
autonomous.
verifiable?
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. I'm
Remind me a little bit.
out here testing it out on
uh,
on everybody.
Remind me a little bit about AI agents, though, huh? But I like I like the autonomous side, right? Because it's true, it's an autonomous process. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and EG, like just to riff on this a little bit, have you thought a little bit about like, the scope of now, like DIN goes from so standard RPC service to now maybe I can express an intent because I can come in and say, hey, can I ask for something to be done across multiple chains, and then like somebody can offer a service because now you have much more programmability and customizability at the DIN level.
Yeah, that's the exciting thing that I really want to start seeing in action once we have the node or the on-chain registry live, because then the marketplace is live and you're going to see both sides of that. Like you're going to
Mm,
see somebody asking for a service that doesn't exist yet. Right now, we've been doing it the other way. We've been taking existing services and offering them to customers. So you could go there and say, you know what, I want a service that looks like this. And you're essentially creating what your service looks like. And it can be like a wrap up of 3 different um,
mhm,
like networks as a unified API, like whatever you want. We're going to see like the creativity of developers actually creating services and saying, not just this is the service that I want somebody to offer, but even like naming their price, right? You could say,
mm,
this should cost me no more than like $100 a month. And maybe
mm,
that's feasible, in which case a provider is going to show up to serve that demand. One of the things that was in one of my early presentations on DIN was there was a lot of skepticism at the time in like, well, is this construct in Web3 really valuable, or is this like, there were people questioning like NFT use cases or certain elements of DeFi and different things. And the one thing that I think is like irrefutable in the Web3 space is if there's an opportunity to like earn revenue by running
mhm.
infrastructure, people absolutely show up to
We'll
serve it,
do it, of
right?
course.
And so if on this marketplace there's an on-chain contract saying you will earn this amount of money or tokens for serving this demand and it looks like this, smart people are going to come along and decide if that is a profitable venture for them to do or not.
Mm,
It might not be instantaneous, but as the market matures, that
yeah.
time of discovering the opportunity and actually launching a service and meeting the demand is going to get shorter and shorter. And so
Mm,
that's what the DIN team is going to be transitioning to work on once we actually get the full protocol live, is developing that type of tooling that allows people to get their services offered and online as
mhm.
soon as possible.
I like I like this. EG actually speaking about like use case or verticals. What are kind of you think like the wish list of those future developers that you would love to build on? Like any specific like use case that you see like running up the most?
In terms of verticals, let's see. So at a high level, there's the raw RPC. So any
Hmm.
EVM or non-EVM like
Hmm.
data access to the node, that's always one thing. Then you have indexed data. So when somebody says, I'm going to pull that data, but store it in a more performant way because I
Hmm.
need different types of ways of querying that data. So that's where you can see like GraphQL types of APIs or index transaction balances, things that kind of simplify things for the developer. And then you have, I don't know what to call it, maybe like augmented or enhanced data APIs, which are the things that are like NFT metadata or things that start to pull and coalesce data from various sources and like enrich data. There's probably some other things that are like beyond that, like more like compute oriented types of things. Like I've had a team come up and say, like, would it be interesting to offer like trusted execution environments on your marketplace, like and it's more like a
Mm,
general construct, right? So you could go onto the DIN marketplace and find some provider out there that's offering, maybe it's just like raw storage for something, or um, the trusted execution environment to run this specific job, right? We're not, there are projects focused on doing those things at like a very low level, potentially with their own utility token and other things. And
mhm,
that's why DIN is a marketplace. Like we're not saying use this particular token for payment, you say what service you're offering, what you're charging in what token,
Mm-hmm.
so that those existing protocols or new protocols that people would build are listing them here. And then it truly becomes like a unified developer experience for anybody that needs to use anything from indexed APIs, RPC, or these execution environments.
The really interesting thing. So EG started the answer with this thing that when you make a system permissionless and there is money to be made, somebody will show up to actually like
Mm-hmm. Yes.
free energy out, right? Like, and that's such a crazy, powerful concept, and it's true everywhere, right? Like, it's if there is an opportunity to make money in a business, somebody will come and do it. But the level of openness. So let me think of this, two worlds, right? So one world, Infura is this, centralized company, versus now you have this concept of a DIN. And think about, suppose I'm a developer, and I have this
Mm-hmm.
idea that, hey, I can build an augmenting service. Let's to make it personal. Let's say I want to serve EigenDA blobs, right? So
Mm-hmm.
EigenDA is a data availability service. So you have a lot of data there. I want to run like some kind of an RPC for EigenDA, right? And I want to do it. Now the previous way to do it would be to like go, talk to EG, talk to somebody else, and see like, hey, do they want to onboard? They have their own capacity limitations. They don't know like if they can scale, because demand might come and go. Like, there's a lot of considerations, rightfully, that need to go into it. But now I can just say, hey, I need this. I'm going to write like this standard and like this payment schema that anybody can come and stake Eigen or something, and then they can provide like an EigenDA RPC service, and then use the DIN EigenLayer AVS framework to now like just go deploy it, right? And now somebody will come in and actually show up to serve it. And so this is really like a mind-bending concept. This is really why like we started EigenLayer. You know, when we sell from our space, we talk about censorship resistance as a very high value, right? And normally when we think about censorship resistance, we think about censoring users, right? So some users on the fringe, they get censored in various ways, and it's very important for us to like fight for it. But even more, and orders of magnitude more, is developers get censored. And don't get censored because like, oh, developer don't come in, but there's no framework for them to actually build on top of, like, let's say like I had a great idea to build a Facebook recommendation algorithm. I'm censored kind of by default, like because I have no way to like go build it on top of Facebook. I need Facebook's permission. Permissionless APIs that actually create this kind of composition are completely mind-bending. And like in 3 years, we'll come back and see, hey, what set of services did people build? And I can bet there'll be at least like 5 to 10 of these like really interesting things that come up that neither EG nor Francisco nor me can guess today. And that's really the power of these systems. So, and maybe now like is a good time I can show you the categories that we were envisioning for EigenLayer
Yeah.
AVS, and just maybe a minute to quickly go over it.
Let me just put it on here.
Yeah, so this was a kind of almost a category chart for like, when I was asked like, hey, you're talking about this, people can come and build it. What is the wish list? And we came up with like, 90% of this, like one year, 1.5 years back. And at that time, it was a wish list. And today, it's amazing to see like every one of this is being built, more than one teams. And so that's crazy. So what are these categories? Number one, we are in the era of rollups for Ethereum, right? So what are the services that augment rollups? You may want decentralized sequencing, you may want bridging, you may want a watchtower, you may want somebody to trigger actions, you may want a data availability, right? So EigenDA is the data availability network we are building. So that's why it's shown in a slightly different color. You may want co-processors. Co-processors are, I'm sitting on a chain and then I should be able to trigger a remote call and then run like some execution and then bring the answer back to the chain with verifiability. So I may want to run an AI to like run some particular process. Now people are talking a lot about agents, right? So just let me take this one example of AI agents as a kind of really clear example of co-processors, right? So I'm sitting on a contract. I need this contract to have higher amount of intelligence than what I can program into an EVM, right? Somebody needs to actually run this complex AI and bring the answers on chain. They think about how do we do that, right? There are different ways that we do it. One way of verifiability is many people redundantly execute it, right? Thousands of people execute it. Like on Ethereum, there are a million nodes, right? Validators, out of which there may be like tens of thousands are unique and independent. So you have like highly written execution, but that's non-scalable, right? To run like a powerful AI agent on a node is like, to calibrate it here is $60,000 a year, right? Just one agent, right? You have to have powerful GPUs. Okay, so that's not feasible to do written execution. What else can you do? You may want to do ZK proofs, right? ZK is all the rage. So you say, okay, I'm going to find like, risk zero or some powerful ZK prover to go and do this, or Linear. And then you go there and then you find like, oh, it's good enough for doing transaction proofs, but it's, AI is just crazy scale, crazy throughput. It's not possible. So you can't do ZK. In fact, to do ZK uh, proofs of like an AI computation may be like 10,000x more expensive to 100,000x more expensive than simply running the computation. That's totally out of whack. Then I say, oh, what else can I do? The right model is crypto economic security. So I stake, and a few nodes run it, and anybody can challenge it. And if they're wrong, they're going to lose a lot of money. So they don't have any incentive to do it wrong. And not only they're going to lose money, we have a framework to redistribute the money to the harm parties. So the contract can hold insurance against the stakers, saying, "Hey, if they don't provide the right answer, they're going to get slashed and redistribute the money back to me. So I'm not taking any net risk." So this is a clear example of why crypto economic coprocessors is a kind of a major category. And what we will see is pretty much all AI agents, if you want it to be verifiable, will be run as crypto economic coprocessors, hopefully powered by Eigen. And then you go beyond that, cryptography, right? Like EG mentioned, trusted execution environment networks, like or multi-party computation. I have a secret. I don't want to tell anybody, but I want to split it across through the network. I want to do encrypted computation. I have a data. I don't want to do computation on plain text. I want to encrypt it so nobody can read it, but still be able to do computation on top of it. This is called fully homomorphic encryption. This is really like black magic, but we have many projects building fully homomorphic encryption on EigenLayer. We have proofs, right? I want to prove to you that I'm in a certain location, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think the on-chain, off-chain dichotomy is being broken, right? How does a chain know where I am from? It should not be able to know. But if I had a network of nodes all around the world and they can send me, internet latency pings and verify where I am, then I can actually prove to the network that I'm in a certain location. And this can be like a huge deal. Proof of location, proof of mesh node. Like I want to prove that I'm a unique device. I'm running a unique device, or I want to prove that I have a certain identity, that I'm a kind of like a passport or something, or I want to prove that I have a Uber rating of 4.9. Right? Like, how do I prove this to a blockchain? We have this new emergent category we call ZKTLS. It's a technical term for what you can think of as how do I make proofs of Web 2 data to Web 3, right? So it's web proofs, right? So but this proof is about a data that's under my password, and I want to prove it to the network. And then like you have all these other categories. You have decentralized storage, oracles, MEV, intents, data archival, and this higher level thing of something like the DIN, which can encompass many of these services inside of itself already, right? So see this fractal branching structure of people can come in and build new and interesting things on top. And the interesting thing is all the things you listed here, more than one team building today. And that's really, really kind of the power of open innovation. The idea that once you give a common trust source, people will come and do the thing that EG said, which is there is free energy that I can actually contribute my like intelligence and ideas into this framework and make some money. Why wouldn't I do it? So that's what
Mm-hmm.
we're seeing. And Francisco mentioned a bit like Consensus and EigenLayer ran this AVS day, and
Mm-hmm.
very interesting to see like at least 10, 15 of these different categories. There were major progress on all
Yeah.
of that.
Yeah.
Right,
We really try to bring together.
back to that.
We really. Yeah, no, we really try to bring together also different ABS category. I think that's super important, and I think that builder really looking like forward to like different toolings, and maybe like kind of like a quick question, like we're almost like on time there, but so where do you see like the common kind of like blocks between kind of like Dean and Eigen, kind of like the full stack, right? You've mentioned some of the blocks of those category being kind of like shared with Dean, or where do you envision also like this to go?
Yeah, I think I think of like this is emergent, right? We don't know. I don't think we can predict like how this thing is going to evolve. This is emergent, and but I think the one thing that Din already has is uh, order flow, right? Like we just talked about, like billions of
Hmm.
like requests a day, and so that is going to attract a lot of developers to come in and say, "Oh, I can just plug in, and like new orders can come in through the system." And so a lot of the off-chain accessed services could go, likely go through the DIN. There are services which will be accessed on chain, like I was talking about co-process or like a DA network or whatever. They're accessed primarily on chain, so that those may be different kind of ABSs. But I think, but this is also emergent, right? Like somebody could just pick up as long as you get a signed output like response, I could pick it up and put it on chain. So it's not a big diff. So we'll see how the kind of ecosystem emerges. But I think we are super excited to see like new and interesting things can be built on top.
Yeah. And then on my side, like just looking at those different verticals, there are so many aspects of that that we need just to continue building the next versions of DIN. Like FHE is a big one that I think is in the future roadmap of DIN, because some people do want that level of security, like guarantees around who actually processes some aspects of the jobs or transactions, API requests that they would send to an untrusted party. And then proof of location and some of the other off-chain attestation types of things that would happen. The other thing is, as we talk about like AI agents and things that would be using these different services, they'll eventually be able to use DIN, right? Because imagine that some of those services that Sriram listed already exist. How does an AI agent get access to them right now? It is very friction full, not frictionless. And if those services are offered on DIN, then they're just funded with a wallet and can be given a budget and told, like, this is the amount of funds that you have in this wallet to solve this problem. Go get access to the services through DIN and build the thing that you need to build. So that's our version of trying to automate as much of the developer flow as possible through DIN.
Yeah, I definitely think there will be coming soon, like some kind of like AI agent wave where people just look for automation. But you touched a little bit on use case, EG, but not speaking about kind of consumer facing dApps, but more kind of like low layer infra dApps. What is kind of like the CTA or the call to action to all the builders hearing this? Like what they kind of looking, like what they should look to build around? Like, do we miss this kind of like layer still, or like what could be kind of like a CTA there?
Hmm. Uh, the
Always spicy
biggest thing,
question here.
yeah, I mean, the biggest thing that comes to mind is that the experience of the more mature EVM chains is different
Hmm.
for developers than those that are building on some like new chain where there's a lot of opportunity, but the tooling isn't as good or the market isn't as good. Like, uh, saw some tweets recently about like fees on base, or sorry, revokes on sorry, reverted transactions on base occurring because of like increased utilization of the chain, and how if you're not actually enabling some of the more like off-chain MEV auctions and things that we have for Ethereum and other more mature chains, when Base doesn't have that, it degrades that experience and creates these opportunities for uh, inopportunity or inequality in on-chain behaviors as a result of that. So as people are developing applications that are targeting new chains or multiple chains, being aware of that as they're both designing their application and picking their infrastructure dependencies.
Nice. Nice. Sriram, any kind of like specific use case you see? You touched already a little bit, right? But and you know better than me, like you know, there is a lot of like AVS developers those days that are pushing definitely like this use case boundary around the AVS category. But anything that you see that is more related to going in this Dean infra dev tooling like layer that you wish to be built, that I think it's very important the side, you know, we need to have like developer communities that are autonomous, building and expanding our tech stack. I think that's the kind of the narrative, because you know like Web2 is always about, you know, let's get feedbacks one way. I think Web3 is not just give feedback, but is collaborate
Yeah.
in building like a modular stack on top of it.
Yeah, and I think the a lot of this is the openness of the system
Hmm.
automatically kind of like pushes has its own momentum, right? Because it's not just, there is the difference, I think, between even like open source movements and like the where still people many people collaborate to like create common code outputs. I think the difference between that and crypto is it's incentivized, right? It's incentivized in the sense that, hey, actually I can come in and contribute and like have a different like request response model, and then actually I can make money off of it because it goes through this particular thing and I can take a cut of it. I think that's the really really exciting thing. And as I mentioned before, this is a emergent thing. Exactly what set of things people build, but I
Hmm.
think it's already at a state where people can look at it and start thinking about what are all the different like applications and services that can be built on top of it. So excited for it and super super pumped about this collaboration.
Nice,
Yeah,
nice.
same.
And we have 4 minutes. I just want to say and revert the question, like what are the things that you wish that that will not happening in the future? Like for example, siloed ecosystem or kind of like non-modular ecosystem. What are the things that you don't want to see moving kind of like forward that you wish kind of like this will not happen?
My take is, this is in crypto, bull market, all kind of crazy things happen. And the biggest worry is something just blows up, right? Like, and I think, how do we make sure that this is a meta thing about like decentralization and permissionlessness is nobody's in charge, nobody's in control.
Hmm.
It's a kind of little bit scary thing that and the reason I think the way to solve that problem is more education and more information, right? So more transparent
Yes.
information and then more permissionless, censorship resistant access. But I think in the coming year, I think this is what I think we have to watch out for as a space. And
Yeah.
as and speak up when like we're seeing, hey,
Yeah.
these are the information asymmetries that might exist in the space, and make sure that you know users as
Yeah.
well as different people are well informed. So that would be my
100%.
number one don't
Yeah.
happen.
Yeah. I think also we need to focus on very practical things, right? You know, developer experience, getting our docs on place, onboarding effectively, like new devs coming and testing, you know, AVS environments. Like, I think this is really like I'm a biased developer, but at the end, this is what matters on the short term basis. Sorry, EG, you wanna go next?
Yeah. Well, one thing I wanted to say was in terms of like use cases I want to see and things is so everybody always talks about like there's too much infrastructure, we need more applications or a better experience for end users that are using these experiences on Web3. I actually see DIN as more of an application than infrastructure. It is infrastructure in that
Mm,
it's a marketplace, but we're not creating a new chain or anything at that lower
mm,
level. It actually is proposing a different way for a user to interact with various networks and service providers, which is an application. And so it's like an infrastructure application.
mm,
I want to see more people trying to do things like that. Like, don't assume that an application is always going to be a wallet or some new like social media app or something like that. That we have like tokenized payments and on-chain governance and all of these different things that now exist as like crypto primitives on Web3. And we looked at it as like SaaS marketplaces. Like we can build a different type of SaaS marketplace on Web3. And that's an application. Like I want to see more projects doing something along those lines.
100%, yeah. I wish we had more times, but we are obviously in this builder bull market. Are you guys taking some rest during Christmas, New Year?
Yeah.
We'll
Yeah, a
try.
little bit.
Very good. All DEFCON at least. Come on. Awesome, awesome. Okay, cool. Thank you so much, guys. We definitely should come back with some of those I think dedicated spaces, much more like technical. I think that's they're super useful also like for the audience. And yeah, if you have any question, we will share more links and feel free to reach out and ask more questions. Thanks
All right.
everyone.
Sounds
Cheers,
great.
everybody.
Thank you.
Cheers,
Thank you
guys.
so much,
Bye.
Francisco,
Cheers, cheers.
EG.
All right.
Exciting.
Good seeing you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Cheers.